My grandmother will call me out of the blue and frantically ask me what's wrong. Nothing's wrong, I always say. You know I already know something is wrong. You may as well tell me what it is. This conversation is a weekly occurrence between my grandma and I. She's an empath, someone who can feel other people's emotions as if they were her own. I am an empath as well. I care about other people much more than I care about myself. So does my grandma. So does my mom. Since empathy is such a big part of my life, I wanted to explore it in my first ever documentary film.
One of the fundamental ways in which we interact with each other is based on the concept of empathy. Because in order to interact with people, we usually, for the most part, have to attempt to identify how others are going to respond and how others are going to think. So I feel like you can't separate empathy from any kind of interaction. I think we just sort of colloquially think of empathy as like the extreme, but it's not. There's all kinds of minor versions.
Definition of empathy. I think it is the capacity to imagine and identify with another human being. Simply, I would think, is something that you feel some kind of allegiance to something that's happened. Empathy is much more that you really have this grasp in terms of a kind of moral imagination of someone who's in a situation that's different from yours. So you can sympathize with a position, but not necessarily have empathy for it in that sense.
I've always been confused about the difference between the definitions of empathy and sympathy. I don't know which one's which.
The definition of empathy is to care about the well-being and condition of others to whom you're engaged. And the engaged meaning could be, you're reading about them, you're dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, but that you have some sense of what they're feeling, thinking, and you would care about things that would be good for them. Sympathy to me would mean that something bad has already happened and you would need to be supportive of that person or acknowledge whatever bad thing happened in a useful way. Empathy is just being mindful of what is going on in the shoes of another person. Could be good, bad, but just as a kind of mindset that you approach not just being overly narcissistic.
Empathy, by definition, is feeling involved, immersed within a situation through your own emotional, sensory, whatever maybe senses, to relate something that you identify with, also with what you're witnessing, what you're seeing. Empathy to me is really getting into the situation and putting yourself in the shoes of whatever entity is kind of in question so that you can understand and relate to it, so that you can more likely understand where it's coming from.
As anthropologists, we are engaging with difference and with others in everything that we do. And part of the kind of challenge that we have is to try as much as we can to bracket our own assumptions, our habits, our preferences, our prejudices, to set aside what we think is natural or inevitable, and to make that imaginative leap to see what the world looks like from a different perspective or position. The field of what I do would not be possible. As a research practice, it wouldn't be possible unless we're capable of making that leap. But also, if we didn't have a world where we work with people who are empathetic with us and tolerant and willing to indulge us with our questions, with our curiosity, and hanging around and watching and working and participating with them. So empathy is really absolutely key to the kind of work that I do. So I would say the best anthropologists have empathy, not all do. A narcissist is someone who's immersed in self-regard, A sociopath I would think of as someone who lacks any kind of human empathy that prevents them from inflicting pain on others or violating others' boundaries. They will transgress those norms and not feel that they've done anything wrong or have a sense of guilt or sadness or anything like that. So they're really lacking that capacity to respond in human terms in ways that are, really bad. Yeah, I think a sociopath classically has been discussed as someone who fundamentally lacks a capacity to understand that they're causing pain to others and that that's problematic. Literally can inflict pain with indifference or maybe even pleasure or delight at being able to dominate someone. I think someone who is empathetic couldn't do that because they understand by inflicting pain on someone else, they understand that common kind of quality of being human and what it means to feel pain, and hence would avoid that.
A person whose only view in any situation is how they win. Sociopath wouldn't exactly be the right antonym because a sociopath is a psychological diagnosis of a person who is unable to understand the disinhibition, the values and other things you're supposed to put in you, but yet they can be empathetic to themselves in ways and they can be manipulable, so they can certainly fake empathy as if needed, but I think they truly don't get why other people would matter in any kind of way. But the opposite of empathy, I don't think, is a sociopath is a person. It's not a set of emotion. And empathy, opposite of empathy is disregard. Empathy is like a broad value that everybody just cites. You can have empathy as cites like as part of my work, like, we care about what our customers think and feel, this kind of thing. For an everyday person in social interaction, empathy means that you would have some kind of genuine concern about what's going on with other people. Somebody falls, do you rush and laugh at them or do you try and help them up? Or you should at least fake it to the point where the effects of it are real. If you actually fake it and don't care and do anything, that's more of a form of disregard. It's kind of form of holding people in contempt. Empathy is what we would call a situated social behavior, which means that you would only know the type it is if you knew what kind of situation people are enacting it within.
Do you consider yourself empathetic?
Yes.
Why?
Because it does matter to me that you are supportive of other people generally, and if you think about them, it just sort of can make you happier. I think also that people don't get a couple of things about empathy. One is that empathy is at heart also selfish. And empathy is selfish to me because you can use empathy sometimes to avoid confrontation. And if you do that to avoid confronting the person about why they're in some situation you're supposed to be empathetic about, then you get out of the hassle of that person being mad at you about whatever it is. So empathy isn't always, to me, just some blanket thing like a giant teddy bear. It's like anything else. It can have multiple meanings and multiple shades depending on the situation.
I would, and I'd put an asterisk on it, though, which is I'm not the best person to judge that. I mean, if you really wanted to find out whether I'm an empathetic person, you should talk to my students, my wife, my dog, my kids, homeless people in the street, because we're not often the best people to judge our own capacity. So it's really putting yourself in the position of others and understanding how your actions might appear to someone else and might impact them, and then being able to make the sophisticated kind of judgment to apply that insight back to yourself and say, I really shouldn't do that, or that's a bad thing, or that's not the kind of way I want to be in the world.
So I think that my wife is very empathetic. She deals with she works with mentally ill adults, and but not even so much in that aspect of her life, like with working with people, but even in my relationship with her, as my spouse, she is very understanding and I think sometimes even to the point where she takes on other people's feelings, like my feelings. Like if something's bothering me, she will do things to try to compensate so that I feel okay. And because I'm, empathetic as well, I do the same for her, and I think that that's like healthy in like a marriage. But yeah, I've definitely even noticed it more lately, and it's not just a thing of like sensitivity and knowing it. It's just a sense, I think, something that's born out of thoughtfulness and, like, I guess just a love for other people.
I think that it's been both a good and a bad influence in my relationships. Because empathy is, of course, essential. Everyone knows this. To better understand people and better connect with people, it's kind of a given. And so I think for the most part, like at that initial step, empathy can help you connect with people, help build friendships, help build romantic relationships and family. Sometimes empathy can get you into a bit of a rut where you never actually take a stance, and all of a sudden you're acting more as a chameleon, where you're adjusting constantly to your environment, but how much is substantially your own opinion, your own thought, your own what have you.
A lot of times I never really felt like I felt for people. It's more of like I could see something's going wrong, and the most I do is ask if you're okay and try to figure out if things are going. But I think if anything, people consider me a really caring person because sometimes I go a bit like above and beyond to get stuff done for people. If anything, like I know I get a lot of things done and help out a lot of people, and they consider like, oh my God, you're so nice and caring. But I don't know, I never really considered that empathy. I just thought that's what comes with being a good person. I've talked to people who believe they're really empathetic, and it's almost like they're in tune with the emotional nature around them, and they feel as though they feel what's going on in terms of the feelings of the next person that's in the close proximity of them. And for me, it's more of, I just do stuff out of morality's sake. So I don't necessarily know if I truly understand how empathy fully works, because I never felt as though I get alarmed or my feelings suddenly go through an influx based on the moods around me. A lot of times I'm able to zone stuff out and just be in my own world. So I don't know, that almost sounds a bit narcissistic, but yeah, I mean, for me, it was at my father's funeral. I was numb the whole time, funny enough, and it was when I looked at my father's casket and I recognized like I couldn't feel in that scenario. I ended up looking around and I just see everyone weeping and just feeling like in a natural sense of it. And I kind of just had this mental conversation with myself where it was just like, well, I'm feeling numb. How about I just take care of everybody else that's in the room? Mm-hmm. So I think the next thing that happened was when people were in the line viewing the bodies, I see my mother and my grandmother grow up. And this was the first time I ever seen my mother like really cry about this sort of issue, because me, my father, my mother, we never grew up in the same household. It was me, my mother, and my stepdad. My father wasn't in my life. He left before I was one. And to see him in the casket, it was finally seeing some sense of emotion from my mother. I always wondered how she felt, and I never asked because I felt like that was touchy matter. She had her own life that was rough in itself, and I'd rather just learn from her and not try to tap into something that would make her uncomfortable. But in that moment of seeing her look at his body in the casket and seeing her shed tears, I kind of just came up right behind her just to check and see if she was okay and gave her a hug. I was like, "You okay, Mom?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Like, I should be asking if you're okay." I'm like, I mean, I'm okay. Like, we can take care of this later. I don't know. I feel like in a moment like that, there was a lot of unpacking that needed to be done for the fact that for you to be a child and you don't really feel for your parent to be in a casket is a weird thing. I'm still trying to understand that today, and I realize like that's not normal to have. So for me, it's like, I don't know. I feel like that's a further reason why I don't feel like I'm an empath, but I feel like I've seen a lot of like empathy be done. I feel like there's a difference between having empathy and being an empath, and I feel like I have empathy, but I'm not necessarily someone that just is like, ooh, I can sense you're like going through something. It's kind of like I just observe and I respond accordingly. Actually, a close friend of mine, her name is Leonise, she's feeling like that. She'll make herself, she'll lose a sense of herself in trying to care for others. And I've only done that one time in my life, and it was because it was a family member that was going through something, and the fact that I found myself like really feeling for the next person. But Leonise, she naturally does that for anyone she knows or she's close to. She's the type of person that she'll look on your face, or she'll see that you're not yourself, or you don't have your usual tendencies, and she'll like pick up on that, and she'll make herself worry. And I'm just like, you're crazy. Because for me, I feel like that's going above and beyond with something so pure. You know, human emotions are a very touchy thing, very subjective, and very powerful, if anything. And to, you know, stretch yourself thin and not just like being there for yourself, but like stretching yourself out for the next person. I feel like that's a scary sort of tightrope to stand on, in the fact that you're really toying with your self, like care, like your self-health, your mental health, psychological health, and the simple fact that you're stretching your heart out to feel for others that they never asked for in the first place.
I've been told that I'm empathetic before, and I hope to be. Like, I aim to be empathetic, but not necessarily because I've experienced the things myself, but because I'm like maybe a step past sympathetic. Like, I haven't experienced it, but I can definitely put myself in their shoes. You could also sympathize or empathize with someone who maybe had a really good experience, and you're like, oh man, I've done that before. That was really awesome. I guess it's just when someone says the word empathy, I first think of a sad thing, but I guess it could also be a good thing. Like, you know, for my family and my close friends and my boyfriend, they're empathetic in a way where if I experience something that was really upsetting, I can talk to them, and they're very thoughtful about my experience. And even if they've never had that experience, they can kind of say, you know, that sounds like it really hurt you, or that sounds like it sucked, or wow, that sounds awesome, you know, depending on what it is. So I think it's just kind of comfort to me. Like when someone's empathetic, it's comforting. And so I think the best people to go to if you need anything in a time of need or anything, those people are usually the empathetic ones.
Like if someone comes to you with a problem and they tell you about it, if you're empathetic to it, that you can kind of see what it would be like if you were in that same situation, and kind of imagine how you'd deal with that and use that to help them. Help people too much with their problems. If you're kind of being empathetic and putting yourselves in that same situation and kind of imagining what it would be like for you, then you'd kind of start feeling those feelings as well, and you might kind of get sucked into the same situation. Yes, I do consider myself empathetic. Sometimes that can be, I don't know, I do see myself as empathetic, and I feel like I don't want to like toot my own horn, but I have noticed that a lot of people tend to come to me about issues that they're having, or just as someone to talk to, because I do like listen, and I think that listening is a good part of empathy as well. So I do feel like sometimes when people come to me about their problems, I tend to kind of try to imagine what it would be like if I was going through the same thing, and that kind of gives me a better sense of like what kind of help the person might be seeking, like if they're just looking for someone to talk to and just someone to listen, or if they want someone to give them feedback and kind of talk things through with them. So yeah, I do see myself as empathetic, I guess, not to brag. But
being in a relationship with an empathetic person, I think can be very beneficial, especially if both people are empathetic. because communication is very important in a relationship, and so if one of you or even both of you are going through a difficult time, it's helpful having the other person be empathetic because they'll be able to kind of relate to what you're telling them, and even if they haven't gone through the same situation themselves, they can kind of envision what it would be like to go through that situation themselves, and they can kind of think if they were going through that, what and they came to you about it, what would they want you to tell them?
That going off the good communication that Andy talked about, that oftentimes, at least for me, I'll have, something that's bothering me that I feel maybe embarrassed about, and I don't really feel like going and talking to someone I maybe don't know as well as Andy. And so it's really nice to have someone that I feel close to, and I feel like I have a lot of trust in him, and I feel like he has a lot of trust in me, to not obviously spread embarrassing things. So it's nice to be able to come to Andy if I feel upset about something at any hour of the day, any time, no matter what, and I can just go talk to him about what's happening. And sometimes he surprises me and says, "Oh, I've had that experience too," and then that's really nice because then we can really bounce off each other ideas of maybe how to get through something or how to deal with something. Mm-hmm. And even when Andy hasn't experienced what I have, he's very understanding and very open about it and doesn't judge me for like, what, that happened to you? How embarrassing, Instead, he is very thoughtful and he chooses his words wisely and helps me feel comfortable with whatever might be bothering.
A strong connection to someone and you kind of know a lot about each other. If they come to you about something, whether it's like a happy thing or a sad thing, you kind of can get a more full picture of what it's about, because you know what else is going on in their lives. So like, let's say, for example, if I get a bad grade on a test, like if I go to just some random person, they might just see like, oh, I just got a bad grade on the test. But if you go to like someone in a relationship, maybe that you're in a relationship with, they can kind of see the full picture. Like maybe for that test, you had other stuff going on. Like maybe you got in a fight with a friend, or like weren't feeling very well that day, so they can kind of get a more full picture of what's going on, and better help you with that because they'll understand a bit more.
I guess sometimes I worry that we both maybe get hung up over someone else's, like not ours, but like someone outside our relationship. We get hung up over someone else's problems or frustrations or bad times. And I sometimes worry that negatively affects Andy or negatively affects me, depending on who the third party person is. Mm-hmm. And I worry that I usually remind Andy, that it's nice to be thoughtful, but you also got to think about your own mental health. And I've also had those worries with me too. I worry that I get too emotionally involved in maybe someone else's thing. And I don't want it to affect me. I want to be able to help, but I also don't want it to affect me in too negative of a way. Got to look out for your own personal mental health as well.
Yeah, I also think it can sometimes get a bit tricky when, like, if one person is having a rough day or like not feeling too well or has anxiety about anything, having both people be very empathetic can kind of cause it so that the other person, it will kind of affect their day a bit too. So like if one person isn't feeling very well a certain day, then it can kind of make the other person's day have a bit more of like a negative tone to it. Not necessarily from the other person causing your day to be bad, but just like seeing Glynis kind of not very happy about something kind of puts me in a lesser mood.
Yeah, because we care about each other so much. It always, even if I had the best day of my life, if Andy wasn't having a good day, it upsets me because I want him to be just as happy as me, and I don't, and when I'm upset, I always feel so bad if, he's having a great day and I tell him like, oh, I didn't have a good day. And then he gets quiet and he's like, oh no. And I was like, no, you keep having a good day. Don't let me drag you down,
Yeah.
So, ever since I was a kid, coming up to her, with problems, and usually most of the time I would say like, Glynis, this is like super weird, like super like deep dark secret weird, but blah 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 blah. And she'd be like, no way, that's totally, I experienced the same thing. I know how you feel. I know how like to fix it. And let me, help you out. So it's just been great, like having someone that I have such a deep connection with that is also like empathetic towards me. And that also helps out, like we're twins, and so we literally experience like the same things. We think the same way. So no, I'm the same way too. Like I agree with Gates in that I also think that Gates is very empathetic as well. Like even if she didn't experience exactly what I experienced, she's very thoughtful and non-judgmental and listens to what I have to say. And she's really good at like just listening. So I feel like sometimes I worry that when someone comes to me with problems about something, I always feel like I talk too much back, like, oh, here's what you should do, and they're like, no, shut up, just listen. And so Gates is really good at doing the just listening part. But if I need feedback too, she's really good at that too. But sometimes it's nice to just talk it out, and it's really nice to have Gates there for that when I don't have Andy, and it's nice to have Andy when I don't have Gates, and it's nice to have both of them, because then I'm like, boom, boom, both of you help me. So or something like with my childhood, like if I'm having flashback troubles with something that's been bothering me for years and years and years, even before I knew Andy, Gates was there, and so I always have her, and that's really nice. I feel like a lot of people don't have that special connection. They don't have someone who experienced almost exactly what they experienced in their childhood. I'll hurt myself, like accidentally I'll trip or something, or I'll hit my arm on something, and I'll get hurt, and Gates won't be nearby, but suddenly she'll just know. She'll be like, oh my gosh, I think Glynis is in trouble. And she'll come find me and be like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, oh my gosh, how'd you know? I just stubbed my toe. There have been other times too where like, I feel like it's always like I get hurt or something, but there was another time when I actually punched myself in the face, and suddenly Gates came in the room and was like, oh geez, my jaw just started hurting. And I was like, I just punched myself in the jaw.
That's
How'd you know?
weirdest thing ever.
So it's like, that's like the ultimate empathy right there, is when you like literally feel the pain. so I don't know, I always wondered like how people who didn't have a twin, like, yeah, I'm sure they find that person to empathize with, but it's so different, like how I mentioned before, how having a boyfriend is a different empathy than having a twin sister. Like I've always had someone who literally I feel like knows exactly what I'm going through. Like I don't even have to say it, I just give her that look, like, how was your day? And I just go, and she knows, oh gosh, So it's amazing. I wish upon everyone to have something this deep. Yeah, but yeah, I feel like people who don't have a twin or don't have a really close sibling, they have to go out in the world and find that person they can relate to and can be empathetic with each other. But I was born with one, and it's awesome. And of course, that doesn't mean I can't find other people. And it doesn't mean Gates can't find other people. Like I have my boyfriend Andy.
Helped
but,
us.
like, it's nice to. Oh no, it's okay. I was just gonna say it's nice to be able to at least have one empathy person with me right here all through my life, But I definitely think it's helped us learn how to empathize with other people, because that's like I feel like a really important characteristic to have, like an important skill to learn, is how to empathize with others, even someone you literally just meet. To be able to empathize with someone, I think is so important for just relationships, but also just human connection. Oh, well, I mean, I know one big change, like empathy-wise, that I've noticed from having Bo, because I had just gotten him last year when we first interviewed, and I mean, I guess like I've always wanted to empathize with others and help others that also have gone through anxiety and stuff, but I noticed with Bo, like meeting more and more people, each time I meet more and more people, I feel like I'm more open about telling them why I have Bo in the situation, but also I notice other people have also opened up to me just from seeing Bo. They'll come up, be like, oh my gosh, I love your dog. Like, how do you have him on campus? I'll say, oh, he's a therapy dog. I had to get it approved by the school, and they'll be like, oh, therapy dog? And they'll explain, anxiety, he helps with that. And then usually they'll be like, oh my gosh, no way, like, I have anxiety. Which is like, usually in a human-to-human conversation, you wouldn't just be like, hey, nice to meet you, guess what? I'm anxious, what's good? You would, so having Bo as like that kind of like empathy icebreaker, I guess, yeah.
to assist with, like, you know, opening up, like, oh, I have anxiety as well, and then, you know, we can start talking about that. I'm way more, like, likely to walk into a room and be like, guys, I'm super stressed out, you know? So it's not only, like, me empathizing with other people, but, like, I feel like I'm more open and, like, willing, trusting in people just to, like, tell them, like, guys, I'm totally stressing out about this project. And then everyone else in the room's like, yo, me too! You know, it's not like a solely, like, oh, I should keep this to myself because I'm supposed to be perfect. Like, no one's perfect. I guess, but, like, dogs just in general, you know how they can just sense human, you know, if someone's, like, a good person or, you know, if anyone's trying to cause harm to them, they can sense when you're feeling sad. I guess one thing, like, the whole twin telepathy thing is, you know, we like to say that we have it, but something that, like, definitely Bo has, that's a little bit more, like, I guess powerful is, you know, their sense of how I'm feeling. So, like, if I come home and I'm having a really bad day, he'll know and just jump up on me and be like, Mom, love me, you know? And I've noticed, actually, if I am, like, outwardly crying, like, you know, if he can hear me cry, most of the time he'll come up and just kind of sit on my feet. Like, he won't come up super close, but he'll just kind of be nearby. Like, hey, Mom, how you doing? Like, you're obviously sad, you know, you obviously need some loving, some puppy love. I guess, like,
he, like, actually,
have you guys noticed anything?
well, he, like, licks your wounds, like literally, like, if you get a paper cut, he'll lick them as if it were his own wounds, you know, because that's what dogs do when they're hurt, is they'll lick it. It's so true. Thank you. That's a good point, though. He, like, literally licks your wounds. It's just amazing. I mean, yeah, sometimes I'll be, like, just really sad talking to Glynis, kind of just on my bed, like, you know, like those days I just don't want to get out of bed, and usually Bo's just kind of, like, playing with his toys, just kind of like, am I gonna get food yet? Like, so I guess, that's, you know, some things, but that partially might just be because I am, like, verbally telling Glynis, and Bo just does it. He's just like, what? I don't, you know. I feel like he taps in more with, like, physical hurt as opposed to mental hurt.
Yeah, that's a good reason, you know, way to explain it. Like, they can sense human, like, how they're feeling, but, you know, he doesn't always act upon it. Like, I wonder if he senses it, but he never, you know, like, I definitely notice if I'm, like, eating if my eating schedule's weird, he'll eat weird.
That's weird.
But it's, like, not that he does it on purpose, he just does it. You know what I'm saying? It's just, like, nature. So I guess that's how the answer to that question is, yes, his schedule will match mine. Like, if I'm still in bed, he'll stay in his kennel.
For me, like, I can't necessarily do that because I have my own human life to live. So, you know, it's nice that Gates has Bo so that she does have someone to eat with her at weird times and to, like, sleep with her at weird times. While I might be like, I can't do that, I have class, you know, so. That's
which
really
is totally
helpful.
understandable. Like, I can empathize with that. You know, where, like, you know, I know when I have, like, times when I just, you know, I can't take away I mean, I would love to take all my time for Glynis, but, you know, I can't. I have my own life, unfortunately. Not, fortunately, unfortunately, you know what I'm saying? But
I feel like oftentimes people who are not twins don't have a lot of empathy for twins because sometimes I'll say, oh, you know, sometimes it's a struggle being a twin. Sometimes I want to be my own person. And I feel like people don't really get that and they don't really empathize, like, oh yeah, you know, it must be such a struggle to be an individual. Like that, like, I feel like not a lot of people can empathize with that, and they're kind of like, yeah, whatever, you're just a twin, you can share whatever. You can be one person. But, like, when I try to tell people that, you know, please relate and please realize that I want to be my own person and that we are not just one person, I feel like, does that make sense? Like, it's interesting. I feel like twins are really good at empathizing with each other, but other people aren't really necessarily good at empathizing with twins.
I had a transplant. It's been a year, actually. It's my anniversary. And I feel like at the time when I needed the kidney, people would definitely try and be like, oh, I understand, I'm really sorry, but, like, you know, how can someone really understand what that's like unless they've been through it, you know? There were times where people would opt to get tested but never get tested, or they would start the process and then change their mind, or whatever, and it was a constant roller coaster. You get your hopes up to get let down, and it's kind of hard for somebody to say they understand that when what's going up and down is essentially whether I'm going to live or not. It's not just, a homework assignment or something more minor that somebody may have experienced. So I think people try to empathize, but it's really hard to say that you can empathize unless you've truly been through what that person has been through, which is why I say that I can sympathize, but I am kind of hesitant to use that word. It was hard for me to kind of see that somebody would want to do something like that. It's a big decision. I mean, you're giving a piece of yourself to somebody else. And for most people, honestly, that freaks them out. If I were someone and somebody needed an organ, I don't know how I would respond to that. It's a very foreign concept. It's something that you will very rarely be faced with in your life. So, I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like in her shoes to make that decision. Obviously, I'm really thankful that she did. But I guess it kind of showed me that there is some good in the world. You listen to the news and you hear terrible things that go on all the time, and it's just a little bit of light in a dark tunnel, I guess, so to speak.
Empathy is so important that at a certain point you can't just be okay with constantly how other people think and feel, because the point of growing is to better ourselves. And so if we're constantly accepting and being okay with how other people feel and how other people respond, then you're not encouraging them to grow, you're not growing yourself, and you're not improving upon the types of relationships. I think it's poisoned, kind of like that one relationship I had with.
I think, like with a bunch of mine, because I've gone through like mental illness type stuff, like I try and help people who are going through that, and I know that people who've gone through similar struggles who are on the other side have also helped me. Even like, look, I know it feels like this now, but like, and I felt exactly like that, but you will definitely feel differently when you're on this side of it. And so like, to have people who have gone through that tell you the same thing, like, they are empathizing with you, so like, it's nice to have people, because like sympathy, I feel like sometimes just feels like people, like, they feel bad for you, but they don't like get it. You have people who are affected by it, it's like, oh, do you feel this thing when you like think, like, anxiety is like a common thing that I can relate to, or like, because I was affected by an eating disorder, so it'd be like, oh, when you eat like this food and then this happens, or when you do this behavior and this happens, like that would be how we like all talk. And like you're like, if I talk like that to my like parents or anything, they'd like freak out, like, why are you talking about this? But like, when people move on through that with you, it's like a totally different like thing. And I think it helps in a way to like get it out, and like, and also like when you're all talking about it, you're like, oh, okay, like this is what we all feel. It's not just me, because like having a mental illness, like that mindset can be very isolating, and you feel like it's just you going through it. It is a very like absorbed thing that happens, because it's like your mind and you're worried about yourself and stuff. And I mean, it's a lot of worry about like what other people think of you, but it's still very much about you and like how you're perceived and how you are acting to the world. So I feel like you are like I remember when I was really into it, I like hated my sister for no reason. I was such an asshole to her. Because I think the natural inclination is to kind of push them away because they want to help you, and like you feel like you don't like need help, or like everything's fine and this is how you're handling things. But like when they want to help you or care about you, and like even if they're like not like older than you or whatever, like they're trying to care about you, and you feel like you don't deserve caring about in a lot of these cases. You just want to live in your mental illness, and if you're really close with people, I think it's harder to do that for a lot of specific illnesses. Like, I had a friend in treatment, and she was worse off than me, and she's definitely improved now. And like, I had to like step in one night because there were things that I had access to that like her parents and the treatment people didn't have access to. And like, I don't know, like, I've been, I think, worried about like my friend in high school who I had falling out with, I tried to like help out. And I think it's important you like try and talk with people as well, because sometimes like they don't want to share with like their parents, or they don't want to talk to like a therapist or whatever, but like you're like a safer option, I guess. But like also like it's important not to try to take on everything that your friend is doing, because like, or like trying to fix everything, because like that can not be healthy for you. I feel like you like care too much about people, and sometimes you definitely like you take on like their issues, and you're like, oh, I can help you with this, and I want to listen to you, and this is all valid, and you start to like not value yourself, or not like it's you take on their emotions, so it starts affecting you, and like you can bring you kind of back to like maybe a negative place that you were in before, and like you know, it can definitely make you worry about yourself or about them more than you, so that like takes over.
Things really I became a safe place for a number of students to come and talk about their own kind of relationship issues. And then as I started getting more involved in feminist work and you know, helping women really make good choices about relationships, I quickly realized that really women weren't the problem. It was really men. And if we didn't focus our attention on men, then we were never going to. So everything kind of morphed into this where I am now. A lot of it's about connection. So, you know, that's really what makes us human, is the desire to be, whether it's with friends or be in a sexual relationship or an intimate relationship. For most people, that's what they really want. Else is just as screwed up as you. No one wants to admit it. So first year, when you're like, I'm homesick, I bet you 95% of the people on campus are homesick, but no one wants to look like the weakling who tells that they're homesick. Getting people to understand that you're not the only one who's struggling with, holy crap, I racked up $10,000 in credit card debt. Or, God, I'm really nervous about this interview. Or, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Nobody else does either. And as soon as you realize that, you can be like, oh, that struggling with the issue of how do I deal with my mom, who when I go home for winter break wants to give me a curfew. When on campus, I'm up till 4 o'clock in the morning. That's all normal. And I think that's the piece that, because we don't talk about that, because students don't talk about it, because as administrators we don't say, hey, listen, this is totally okay. It's totally okay to wonder what the hell you're doing. Or to have experimented potentially with alcohol or drugs and be like, damn, why did I do that? So just always remember that you're not alone, that everything you've dealt with, someone else has probably dealt with before, and they've survived it, and they've moved through it, and they've become very successful.
By doing these interviews, I realized empathy was not just a big part of my life, it was a big part of everyone's life. Empathy is a critical part of humanity that I feel is underappreciated. This documentary helped me to explain and learn why empathy is so critical and how it tends to fall to the wayside, but it never should.
Best laid plans, sometimes it just a one night stand. I'll be damned, Cupid's demanding back his arrow. So let's get drunk on our tears, and God, tell us the reason youth is wasted on the young. It's hunting season and the land